So I quickly wanted to talk to you guys about the parent-child dynamic and how it affects our relationships. So, most life coaches and most therapists, most psychologists, psychotherapists, behavioral therapists focus in on a person when they walk in through their door and they're looking for therapy, and they talk about whatever, whether it be money problems or wife problems, husband problems, children problems, problems with their parents, problems with their whoever, whatever problems they're having. What therapists do is they talk about, they try to look at the person's life, and they try to talk about their childhood in some way. So they first try to understand the situation as is right now in the present, and then they slowly dig into what their childhood was like. So a lot of therapists, this is my experience with life coaches, and I've been to a therapist, I've been to a life coach. She had a really good certifications from Harvard, so she was very well educated, years and years of experience, like 20 to 30 years of experience. What they first try to look at is they look into what you perceived your relationships as when you were a child. So how you saw relationships unfold in your childhood with your family, your caretakers, etc. From there, they try to understand how you perceive the world right now. So they try to understand, so if you have problems with your significant other, whether it be a husband, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, and if you're a woman, for a woman, how, if you've ever heard that saying, how a girl looks for her father when they go to look for a man, that is actually true in a way, because our subconscious mind is fully developed at a young age. From the day we were born, our subconscious mind is there. So what that means is the things that we learn from the people around us when we're children, they stay with us more than we know. So let's say if you've seen a really dysfunctional relationship in your childhood, where you've seen your caretakers fight a lot, you've seen abuse happen in your family, physical abuse, mental abuse, and it doesn't have to be something huge. It can be something as little as, let's say your feelings weren't validated when you were a child. What you were feeling as a child wasn't recognized, wasn't heard, and you felt like you couldn't be yourself around your caretakers. These things, when we're children, these things stay with us, and they stay with us in our adulthood. Most therapists, most life coaches, they talk about the years of 7 to 9 years old. Up to that point in our life, we tend to absorb everything up until that point, and those patterns that we've learned, before the age of 7, 8, 9, they repeat in our life throughout our adulthood. So an example is if you felt invalidated with your mother and or your father, caretakers, and with your feelings, and you couldn't be yourself, you couldn't express your emotions, you couldn't cry. Let's say as a man, right? In adulthood, you're gonna feel like you can't be yourself around other people. You can't cry, you can't be sad, you can't be angry, because as a child you weren't validated with your emotions. Another way that it affects a person is that the way that we experience our caretakers during childhood is how we end up treating ourselves during our adulthood. So this is a parent-child dynamic that a lot of therapists and life coaches talk about, where the way that our mother and father, our caretakers, treated us, the way that we felt that they were treating us, we tend to treat ourselves that same way. So let's say if you felt invalidated and not heard as a child, You know, when you cried, you were told not to cry. When you were angry, you were told not to be angry. And or like, you know, you were told that you're a bad person for having emotions. As an adult, you tend to do the same things to yourself. So you start to be the parent within yourself, telling yourself that when you're angry, it's not okay. When you're sad, that it's not okay. You can't express your emotions. You can't show your emotions. And so I think it's really important as adults for us to understand that this happens to everyone. Dysfunctional relationships is actually the norm in our society, and it's a sad thing, but it's the truth. Dysfunctional relationships is normal, more so than functional. And it's so important for us to understand the family patterns that happen in our family, you know, how our caretakers in our life affected us, because the way that we were affected as a child is how we treat ourselves as adults, and it's how we influence our children in our life. So it's a lot. I've learned this through, you know, again, through life coaches, through therapists. I've been to countless workshops. I've been to countless sessions, and one of the things that they always talk about is subconscious programming. You know, things that we learned in our childhood, things that we don't understand how it stays with us in our adulthood. So I wanted to share this because the reason I'm sharing this is because I've seen so many women in particular come out of relationships, and this is also in my past. I've also experienced this. Come out of relationships that were abusive, dysfunctional in some way, form, or shape or form. And then 4 to 6 months later, they're in another relationship and they're so happy and everything's fine. And they're posting all these pictures of how things are great. And before you know it, they're engaged and about to get married. And I'm like, no, this is horrible, because the truth is that unless if you take some time to really dig in within yourself and to understand the patterns within yourself, you're not going to find a functional relationship. If you've been in an abusive relationship in the past, if you've experienced abuse and dysfunctionality in your childhood, which, like I said, 99% of all relationships of all families have some sort of a dysfunctionality, and it varies in degrees, but we have it. It's the norm, and it's okay to have it. There's nothing wrong with it because it's the norm. We all have something that doesn't really work for us in our families, right? We all have something in our family that's not okay. So you have to realize that. And for women, I encourage women to really take the time. If you've been in relationships that were dysfunctional, take the time with yourself, take the time. And that's what I'm trying to do in my life. I'm taking the time to be with myself so that I can understand more of me and how I was in my past relationships, what happened during my childhood, what are the things I've seen, what are the things I've experienced. So women, really, like, if you're single, just take the time. You don't have to rush. You don't have to settle. Time is what you need to understand everything about yourself. Okay, well, if you've joined me, thank you for joining me, and until next time.